Welcome everybody to the Boardroom live session. Today we have an incredible guest. Her name is Val Ackerman. She is the commissioner of the Big East Conference. Val, how are you?
Great, Jay. Great to be with you.
Good to be with you too. You're a New Jersey person, which gets me very, very excited about this connectivity here. But before I get into some of your roots, can you explain to me what does it entail to be a commissioner of a league? What is your day-to-day responsibilities?
Jay, every day is different, which makes it fun. It's a lot of meetings. There's a lot about the job that's not very glamorous, being on conference calls, for example, and responding to endless email. But the best part of the job is getting to go to games. I do a lot of that under normal circumstances, especially during the basketball season. But we have 22 sports that we sponsor in the Big East. So that gives us kind of a year-round complement of fall, winter, and spring contests to travel to. And that's a lot of fun. I go to a lot of meetings dealing with the conference and the NCAA. And we do a lot of services for our schools. So it's not unlike work I did at the NBA and the WNBA. It's a similarity in terms of the function. But the best part is dealing with great people, be it in the conference or without. So I feel very lucky to be in this position.
Your career trajectory has kind of been incredible to pay attention to and watch, not only with the NBA, the WNBA, also president of USA Basketball and some other things. Provide me some context with how somebody from New Jersey reaches the heights of becoming the commissioner of the Big East.
Well, I owe it all to being from New Jersey. So that's the first thing. I am a Jersey girl through and through. Springsteen, Jersey Shore.
Yes.
My mom grew up in Trenton. I mean, there. But what it really did, in seriousness, as I know it did for you, date back to playing sports. I was a basketball player like you, and got to go to play in the ACC, the Great Atlantic Coast Conference.
Virginia, very good school. UVA.
Virginia's a pretty good school. Exactly.
Great school.
Yeah, great place to be for 4 years, and then I just found myself at the NBA in the early years of David Stern's commissionership. The place was really small. We were under 100 people, believe it or not, when I started at the league.
Wow. And
I started out in the legal department working for Gary Bettman, who was the general counsel, of course, now the longtime commissioner of the NHL. But it was really David, and Russ Granick, who opened doors for me, worked closely with Rick Welts, a dear friend, now running the Warriors. And it just kind of got me going, and doors opened, and I grabbed the opportunities as best I could. And then now, frankly, it feels like full circle to be back in college sports, which is, where we started. And so it's been a great ride, and hopefully I can keep making some contributions before I sail off into the sunset.
Yeah, you came into the Big East after the first inaugural commissioner, Dave Gavitt, and you took the torch from him. But I was reading an article, I was laughing about this. I wrote it down. You said when you first came in, no email system, no website, no employee benefit plan, insurance policies, or even payroll system. So this was essentially a startup when you first started.
It was. I mean, you may remember, Jay, back in that, there were sort of a real hectic couple of years there in terms of conference realignment. There was a lot of movement from to different conferences, all of it driven by football interests. And so there was Big East, schools leaving mostly for the ACC, but the basketball schools kind of left behind, and then deciding, led by Georgetown and Villanova and others, that they needed to control their own destiny. And so they made the move to break away, 7 of them, the Catholic 7. They literally grabbed Butler, Creighton, and Xavier and said, okay, we're going to go back to the roots, what Dave Gavitt started in 1979, and be a basketball-centric conference, not basketball only. As I said, we have 22 sports, but basketball-centric. And Fox was looking for programming, so that enabled we're in the midst of a great partnership with Fox Sports on the TV front. And all this got done, and then they needed somebody to bring it to life, and that's where I came into the picture. So it was a startup. All of the infrastructure was left behind, if you will. It's what's now the American Athletic Conference. So I had to start from the beginning, hire my staff. I had no office space. I was literally doing it off my iPhone. And so it was a crazy couple of years, but that was then, and this is now. And, hopefully we won't have to go through that again in the history of the Big East, but it was a hectic couple of years, and I'm really happy with the progress we've made since those early days.
Now, a question for you. How were you supposed to do without having that type of infrastructure in place? I mean, you're hitting the ground running because games are still going on. You still have scheduling that you need to do. How were you able to keep everything together?
It was like great. I was just, beg, borrowing, and stealing people. I mean, the law firm that represents the conference put me up for what ended up being 14 months. So I was able to hire staff and park them there. The schools were fantastic. I mean, they were chipping in with their staffs to help with championship scheduling and modeling. We were just kind of swept along by the necessity of having to get things done. I got a couple of staff hired within the first, I don't know, month.
Hmm.
So we had a bare minimum, but it really, we weren't settled. It wasn't until 14 months later, as I said, that we moved into our now digs, got our sort of legs under us. And then good things started to happen, particularly in basketball with the great work, by our men's basketball programs. And then things started to, hold together and start to feel pretty good. But it was crazy. And it was sort of exciting. I'll put it in a book someday, but it was a very tireless and exhausting stretch there for a while.
Can only imagine. So take me to where we are currently today. Obviously, every business, our government, state by state, we're all dealing with COVID-19. How has COVID-19 impacted the Big East?
Very, very much so. I mean, starting in March, of course, when the virus outbreak started to pick up in the U.S., all of the conferences, as everybody knows now, were all scrambling in March to try to figure out if they could get their men's basketball tournaments in. None of us were lucky enough to have that happen. A few leagues, as you know, play earlier, and earlier than when we play. And the ACC plays, for example, so they were able to get it in under the wire. But the rest of us were dealing with just terrible circumstances, needing to make monumental decisions, relying on governmental authorities in all cases. So, and then of course we lost March Madness. And that was upsetting to us. I mean, we had a really good season this year in men's basketball, as you know. We were looking to maybe get 6 or 7 teams into the tournament. We thought we had a couple that had a chance for deep runs, led by, for example, Seton Hall,
Yep.
with Miles Powell leading the way, consensus All-American. And so it was really heartbreaking. We quickly canceled our spring sports on top of the basketball season, and that was heartbreaking. And so now I would just describe to you the last, I don't know what it is now, I've lost track, 10 weeks. We've been picking up the pieces from that, dealing with the financial fallout, and then trying to plan what right now with our full, including basketball. The focus right now on football and soccer and other sports, but not far behind worrying about the basketball season next year. So it's been really a whirlwind and a lot of Zooming, and we'll get through it, I know, but it will be, I think, a very uncertain stretch for a while.
Had to stop the game mid-game, St. John's versus Creighton. I remember watching it on TV. Taking you through, how does that work, right? Because obviously you're waiting for government stances on certain issues to dictate what your protocol should be. If that isn't as fine-tuned as it should be, you guys are on the fly having to make decisions, but also dealing with fan engagement, people wanting money back for tickets. Like, how do you handle all that on the fly? What kind of system did you guys put in place to manage all those expectations?
Well, the good news is we had planned for every possible scenario. We had 8 convenings of our board members, our presidents, and our athletics directors in the 5 days leading up to the cancellation of the tournament. We were in constant communication with our schools. I was dealing directly with the city of New York because we were all over whether they were going to do anything relative to mass gatherings. And literally up until, I think the call I had was at 12:20 p.m. on the day of our quarterfinals. That's when we learned for the very first time that the city of New York was going to restrict large gatherings. And as soon as we learned that, I mean, we ended it. And the NCAA finally was a source of guidance. We had already made the decision to go to a restricted attendance scenario. So that last bit of a game was with very few fans in the building. That was already done. We had restricted locker room access. I mean, the Garden was cleaning the building. They had new sanitation procedures, and we were in lockstep with them. They were in turn in touch with the governor's office. I mean, it was a whirl. And we did everything that we could. And again, when we heard from the city that everything in New York was shutting down, I mean, Broadway was still going and the subways were open and schools. So we were really in lockstep with what was happening with the city. But it was, again, a series of days. I hope never to repeat. Hope we can learn going forward how we can better synchronize with the NCAA and the city and state authorities we're relying on. I don't think anything normal is going to come out of COVID, but hopefully some of these processes can be reviewed and we can maybe do things a different way next time.
Scary to say that, we're already here in May and you have to start preparing for fall sports. What is the path for fall sports in the Big East, and what kind of conversations are you having with different schools? Because obviously that could change depending upon geographical locations.
Well, it's constant. Every league now is trying to help their schools, and they're all in different places. I mean, right now in the new Big East, we've got 11 different jurisdictions. We've got 10 states, including UConn, which is coming online in July. And then the District of Columbia, where Georgetown is. So we expect that we could have a patchwork of outcomes related to campus reopenings in the fall. Those decisions will be made by our schools in concert with their local authorities. And so we're already bracing for the possibility of staggered start dates for our fall sports programs. And our schools are fine with that. I mean, they've already decided more or less that if one school can start, they should start and not be held back because another school or another state isn't ready. I'm on 2 or 3 times a week calls with other commissioners and the NCAA who's trying to figure out fall sport championships. The NCAA's passed a host of rules to try to deal with the temporary disruption, we hope. Just, what they call legislative measures, rules changes to offer waivers and try to deal with dead periods and recruiting rules and so on, just to get us through this. So they've been on overdrive in Indy, trying to sort that all out. And we're all trying to build, as I said, contingency models for the fall. We just don't know, to your point, about what the facts will be in 3 months and what's going to look like in October, November, January. So I think all we can do is try to forecast. We've got a task force within the Big East of doctors and trainers to help give us some guidance on medical protocols and things we need to know we can do if we're going to safely resume sports activities. So it's just like a lot of moving parts right now. And so it's really hard. I'll be very interested to see what some of these pro leagues do, candidly, including the NBA, because we have the luxury of a little more time than they do. And so we're certainly going to be taking our cues there, but it's a very difficult process. I know we'll get through it, but in the meantime, as I said, it's going to be a pretty uncertain stretch of months.
I mean, I don't even know where you start, Val, with creating contingency plans for a potential second wave. How many contingency plans go into the equation when you start preparing for sports that are 3-4 months away?
Jay, it's really hard. I mean, I don't have time on our talk here just to go through the list of issues and possibilities and concerns. I think it ranges. I'll just maybe do that. The spectrum includes, late starts, starting and then stopping, starting, stopping, resuming, starting, stopping, and canceling. In basketball, the hope is that we can finish. I would say that would be the best result, is that we can have a Big East tournament next year and we can have a March Madness. And we have time there, I think, relative to the calendar. So that's good news. Many leagues are looking at a reduction in the number of games. We're all looking at venue management protocols. I mean, everything facilities related has to be looked at closely. The most important thing is the safety and the health of the participants. That's top of mind for everybody, is how do you make sure these athletes are coming back to a safe environment when school returns and they stay safe on their campuses, which are, there's pockets of the campus which one could describe as petri dishes. So how do we manage those? And we're not like the pro leagues where we can just construct a bubble someplace and put everybody on a plane and then just fly them in and keep them there for 2 months. We don't have that luxury. And so it is really hard. And I think the only thing I can tell you is I think that'll become clearer in the coming months, because it has to. We just have to know as the calendar creeps up on us what we're doing. And I think you're going to see more clarity on this probably in the next month or 6 weeks would be a guess.
Oh, so many things are changing so fast. I feel like it's happening at warp speed. This morning, I was reading an article that the University of California is, their regents has revoked the right for students to submit SAT scores and ACT scores for admission. Do you think this is something that we may see more colleges do because they're trying to recalibrate, maybe market to get people to pay tuitions, things of that sort? How do you think this is going to change the dynamic of sports, or maybe it isn't?
In the college space, Jay, I mean, we're kind of a microcosm really of what our schools are dealing with generally on their campuses. I mean, they're faced with just massive issues right now as it relates to reopenings, the possibility of declining enrollment, funding because of declining enrollment will be impaired. They're all worried about how they're going to keep their athletes safe. They're all in the midst of important decisions about whether to reopen, how much of it would be online, which is what's happening now, versus in person, how to deal with everything from dormitories to dining halls to libraries and, of course, sporting events. So the kinds of measures that you mentioned, I think, are all in response to this need for flexibility and being nimble and just trying to manage as best they can through what they hope will be a temporary period. But from all reports, it could be, there could be ripple effects here. It could be another year or two before colleges really get back on their feet again. So I'm not surprised to see, that happening. As I said, states are going to be making important decisions about the reopening of America, and colleges will be very much part of that. And our presidents, I'm just saying, because I'm seeing it in the Big East, have really hard jobs right now. And, and so what we do in athletics, I think, will be truly a function of the bigger and, frankly, in some ways more important decisions that they're going to be making campus-wide.
Yeah. How do you deal with name, image, and likeness? I mean, it's like all these things are compounding upon each other at the same time in the midst of a pandemic. How will that alter the landscape of collegiate athletics?
I suspect it'll alter it considerably. I think, I spent a lot of time on this in the last year. Gene Smith, now my good friend from Ohio State, and I co-chaired a national working group of NCAA administrators and student athletes to look at the rules. We did recommend to the NCAA board that we open things up. And so starting, I believe, next year, it won't be this fall, it would be at the earliest next year, 21-22, that academic year, student athletes are going to have opportunities they just haven't had before to earn income from outside entities related to their names and their likenesses. And so that could include anything from using those NILs to support businesses they've started, books they've written, songs they've composed, modeling activities, and then importantly, third-party endorsement arrangements, which are common in the pros, have never been allowed before in college sports. So our working group, there are going to be a lot of complexities involved in implementation here because our space is different than the pro leagues. Most notably, we recruit our athletes. Yeah. They come in as free agents, if you will. And so that's a different dynamic than if you're told by the NBA or the NFL what team you will be playing for. So we have a very different dynamic there as it relates to recruiting and booster influence and so on. But that said, we were sort of undaunted by that. We thought we really had to find a way to allow this to happen. So as the details get worked out in the coming months for vote next January, there'll be more clarity around some of the specifics here. But I think for athletes, not just at the tippy top, I think those are the ones people think about the most when they think about endorsement opportunities. I think Olympic sport athletes and women's sports athletes really are going to have some opportunities here that were never before available to them. And I think it can really be a boon to them. So we're happy to support that. And again, details have to be worked out. But I think to your question, I think it will be a big change.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea. I think it suits. I think it feels correct. But there are also so many, it is the correct thing to do, but there's so many things that come along from a governance perspective and how you can monitor everything, Val. Like, how do you make sure that there's no conflation between what is an endorsement or what is a recruiting tool used for a kid coming into a school? Like, how do you even balance that?
It's like the $65,000 question, Jay, and we wrestled with it we had hundreds of hours of meetings of our working group over the last year. And this was like every meeting was, okay, how are we going to deal with recruiting? How are we going to deal with boosters? I can't tell you exactly, there will be rules about it. There have to be. The compliance, as you know from your college sports days, the compliant, every campus has a compliance department, which is in charge of the rules. And so those folks, for better or worse, are going to be, having added responsibilities. One of the things that we're looking at is a third party entity that we could create that would be a repository for disclosures by the athletes about these endeavors. So at least we can sort of look to them for some accountability here and some honesty about the arrangements. But in terms of, how to kind of keep it from really spiraling there in terms of these things, we have to try. I mean, that's my view, is we'll just have to figure it out. We may have to change the changes once we get a little further into it. But again, given how important this was, we thought to our athletes and how we need particularly to stay in step with the times, especially as it relates to social media opportunities, which weren't on anybody's radar screen some years ago when these NIL rules were put into play. We just felt that we had to move forward. So lots to be done there to answer your hard and important questions, but we'll know more in a couple of months.
Well, one of the schools that you can definitely tell, individuals will be able to capitalize off their name, image, and likeness is UConn. How good does it feel to have UConn? I grew up from Jersey, watching them participate in the Big East. I got recruited by Jim Calhoun, those guys, even though I attended Duke. It feels good, like the geographical footprint fits back into the Big East once again. But how does a decision like that come to fruition regarding financially and all the things that UConn brings back to the Big East?
Well, you named a couple of the issues. I mean, this was a very thorough process by our schools. We were really, frankly, really happy with 10 schools in the new Big East. It was working pretty well. We weren't really, pressing hard or thinking we needed to add any new schools, but UConn was the one school that was in a league of its own. I mean, if you looked at the history, as you noted, they were a charter member of the conference. I think they spent 34 years or something in the Big East before the big change of 7 years ago. The geography made sense. The rivalries that were in existence, of course, and some of those have been going on anyway, even though they were in another league. And then importantly, to your point, the basketball, most of all, they have more than 20 sports they sponsor, but basketball, I mean, Big East basketball and UConn were kind of synonymous there. And so the idea of what they would bring from a competitive strength of schedule standpoint, the Garden, for the tournament. I mean, we're already this year. I mean, our tournament didn't finish, but we'd sold tickets to UConn fans who were coming this year, even though UConn wasn't in it.
Wow.
And then, last but not least, women's basketball. I mean, I've had the honor of knowing Gino through my work in women's basketball for many years. I mean, he really is greatest of all time material. Just an incredible program. And so now that's in the Big East. So, that's daunting competition, of course, for our women's programs, but they all embraced it. They thought, you know what, this is good for us. We're going to play against the best. That's going to make us better. So for us, it's, all win. It's going to be great. I just wish it wasn't under such fraught circumstances coming in, but it is what it is. And so I think long-term, it hopefully will keep what's been a really proud conference prouder and strengthen our prospects as we look to the future and our continued successes, particularly in the great sport of basketball.
Well, congratulations on bringing UConn back. I really think that's incredible from a kid that grew up watching UConn basketball. It fits, and it gives such a different pop to the Big East. Again, if you guys are able to move through this pandemic, where do you see the future of the Big East Conference? What are things that fans should be looking forward to about where this conference is going? And maybe if that's technology that you guys are bringing into it, maybe different ideas that are going to be a differentiator for your conference.
Jay, I think the future for the Big East, I think, looks very bright. I mean, I don't expect we're going to go back to football. That ship sailed. Our schools are basketball schools. They're in urban environments. I think that's not in their blueprints. But I think we can remain a really, really strong basketball conference. We've got great coaches. We've done, I think, a really good job with coaching retention. And this league, as you know, is built on the backs of great coaches. You mentioned Jim Calhoun, but it was Louis and Big John and PJ and Boeheim. And those names still come up all the time. And we got a great group this time. I mean, when you look at, Danny Hurley and Ed Cooley and Kevin Willard and Jay Wright and Greg McDermott and on and on and on. I mean, they're all amazing ambassadors as much as great coaches. And so I think if we can keep up with the leadership piece, we're playing great venues. The Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden is an asset. Fox has been a great partner on television. We have every one of our men's basketball games is on national television. So I think we have the ingredients to stay really competitive in men's basketball. I think UConn especially will help us on our women's side. We do well in some other sports. Georgetown won the national championship last year in men's soccer. We have Denver as an affiliate in lacrosse. They won national championships. UConn is a field hockey powerhouse. I mean, it's not just basketball for the Big East. So I think we're good. And then the values that our schools hold dear, like academic success and then service and some other accoutrements that mean a lot to our schools, I think are solid. And I think give us an identity that rounds things out. So it's not just a group of basketball schools, it's more than that. So I'm bullish. I think our world will be changed because of COVID. So I think my job is to help our schools try to keep up with that, maybe get in front of it a little bit at the back end. But it's been, great to be part of it. And, as Dave Gavitt once said, the march of the Big East goes on. And so that's kind of our creed and something we follow every single day.
I really commend you. There's a lot of moving pieces and all the things that you have to manage. And, I've been paying attention for a very long time to your career. And you are more than bullish. I think you have the right to be confident in your leadership style and where you're going with the Big East. It's an incredible conference, and I'm glad that being from New Jersey, I even though I wasn't a part of it basketball-wise, my heart is always with the Big East. So I'm glad it's in good hands.
Great, Jay. Thanks so much. I really appreciate those kind words. Great, right back at you. Thanks for all you're doing.
Thanks.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks.